Kia ora everyone, I'm Bruce Howard, Chair of Waiuku Family Support. Welcome to another one of our podcasts. All our guests are special, but today's one is extra special. Moerangi is the wairua, the essence of who and what Waiuku Family Support is. And we have many conversations, and we're going to restrict the time today because we jokingly before it started said that this could go for 2 to 3 days, knowing what we're like when we get together. So enjoy Moerangi, but she is a unique, very special person, and Waiuku is blessed to have her presence with us. And I've been thinking about it a lot lately, the different settings that as a kid that we did that. You'd go to the beach and a fire would be lit on the beach and the logs would be dragged in and you'd sit around it. And, I went to church camps, I went to all sorts of different camps as a kid.
So when you were doing that, like I'm just kind of reflecting, because, I think we all did it. But when you did it, how many children actually got hurt or got burnt because you had a beach fire?
Don't have a single memory.
Exactly.
To be honest, though, I've got to put in context. I only remember through my youth years one firework accident.
Yeah.
And that was where a kid lit a skyrocket and actually didn't have a secure thing. It tumbled over and it went through Dad's office window and started to set the office on fire. So, but, that was so exceptional. It really was.
Yeah, it was, And I think it's just, more behavioural just lack of respect.
Yeah, we've lost something there because when we were brought up, it's like we were talking earlier today, that at the mealtime you sat there and
we had to ask to leave the table.
Exactly.
It's like, may I leave the table, please? And so basically, if you hadn't finished your food, is don't come back and tell me you're hungry.
Exactly.
That's just how it was.
It was, and we've lost that now because people sit and eat, have the TV going during a mealtime and things like that.
We didn't worry about lunch or anything when we were young. We just go to the nearest tree and grab an apple or fruit or something and just keep on going.
It was breakfast and dinner were the two main meals as a family. I always remember when I was at high school, I used to go home for lunch because it was only me living at home with Mum and Dad, and that was a formal luncheon. But my earlier years prior to that, we had too busy out tearing around hills.
We had church lunch every Sunday.
Oh, yes, we did that.
That was every Sunday. We had a roast usually.
Yes, well, Dad being a minister, there was Mum always put the roast on, so in the slow cooker, well, it wasn't slow cookers, it was the nature of stoves and that back then. And by the time you got home from church, it was
and
cooked
it was
to
funny,
perfection.
they left it going all by itself.
Exactly.
And like I never ever knew that. I always try to figure out how did the roast cook because there was nobody home. But they just put it on, and it was like now it's like, oh my you dare leave anything on the stove and go out.
And how many house fires did you hear about?
None. We didn't have, I don't recall any house fires when I was growing up.
One of my uncles did that, and it was because they went down to see the neighbours and they'd left the fire guard round the fire, and like a lot of the old fire guards, they were more holy than righteous, and a spark went through, and the first they knew something was wrong was when the fire engine went roaring past the place they were visiting. But that's the only incident. It is a major when you have your house burnt down. I'm not devaluing that.
No.
But it just was not a common thing. Because we actually thought about safety.
It was just something normal. It was just something we were brought up in, wasn't it?
Exactly.
No, because it's like we weren't told you can't go and swim there. We just knew not to go swim there.
Exactly.
We knew you can't jump there because it's too shallow. Nobody put a sign up to say you can't jump there because it's too shallow,
Well, there were no signs around.
No, there weren't. Yeah.
We do have a lot larger population and all the things that go with it, and that sort of stuff worries me. But I was fascinated in the conversation this morning about the ritual of food. We've lost something holistic, for want of a better phrase.
I think we've lost a lot of things, actually.
And we don't fully appreciate, well, I shouldn't say there's people that they don't actually appreciate the importance of quality and healthy food and the difference it makes to your overall well-being.
Because, and it's all about money, really. You know, you take away McDonald's and you take away KFC and you take away all of that, and it's not a choice. They'll have to go back to that, but they won't because of the money. It's like, and then you're saying to people, you need to diet, you need to exercise, you need to do all these sorts of things. Well, get rid of all that rubbish and you'll be fine.
Well, a mate of mine the other day made the comment that one of his grandkids asked him, "What sort of takeaways did you have, Granddad?" And he said, "We didn't even have a concept of takeaways. There was no such thing.
Fish and chips.
Fish and chips was the closest, but that was usually a once-a-week treat."
Yeah, that was at school.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we were pretty, I guess, spoilt too because, like, we knew what fish was. So.
And it was always fresh, beautiful quality fish.
We didn't have frozen fish or anything like that.
No, we didn't. We never had anything to freeze anything until I was in my teens. It was the first time Mum and Dad went and bought a freezer. So everything was fresh. And Dad always did his own composting. So we ate out of our own veggie garden because they didn't have the money to go and buy vegetables.
No, same. We didn't. No, he had his own gardens, and I don't recall us having a freezer, actually. I'm trying to think. Unless, those just little fridge freezer thingies, but...
No, we had a fridge, but it was in my teens and I was the youngest by a long way, that Mum and Dad, and it was set out in the garage because it wasn't to be used lots.
Because of power. Because
of the power, but the philosophy was we ate fresh all the time.
Yeah.
Dad would be up at 5:30 every morning out in the garden. We always used to joke that a weed was too terrified to come to his garden because of the way he cared for it. It was true. His gardens were always perfection.
Yes. Yeah. But that was that era, though, wasn't it? Like even with the building and that, because my dad had one of those, what do you call it, levelers, and you name it, he had it. So anything he did, it had to be leveled, and it had to be this, and if it was there down a bit, like you'd make sure it was even, and just took the time to do all those.
Yeah.
And that was just,
Well, I still do my own composting.
Yeah, we do.
And it's interesting, both my natural daughters, they actually have got huge veggie gardens. The tradition's been, but I know we're in the minority operating like that. And I don't buy anything at the supermarket vegetable-wise that that I know of them myself. If I'd got round to it, because I've got a small, because I'm in a rental place, I'd be growing that at this time of the year. Therefore, it's safe to me to eat. Because it was some of the language that those two used this morning, and young Sophie that came with Mershon, when she talked about the spirituality of food, I thought, you don't hear someone talking like that much now. And in fact, to hear a young lady make that phrase really clobbered me between the eyes.
That's our Sophie.
Yeah. No, not our one. The
little girl over there in the corner by
Mershon. Yeah. She actually raised it. That food plays a role in our spiritual lives, and I thought, wow, you don't hear that very often nowadays.
No. But when you look at, I guess, when you look at the whare tapa whā, and that it's a holistic well-being. It's not a portion.
That's right.
Yeah. So if one's out of kilter, they're all out of kilter till you manage to put them back into a better management. So yeah.
So see, that's part of my belief, that when you take people away from their environment of the marae-based life, that you take them away from all those different rich elements that are often not openly spoken about, but they are there as in the old Kaumātua and Kui would actually explain.
The guidance.
Yes. And that's what the marae provides, but not many other settings in society do.
No. I guess they do, but from a different lens. Like when you're looking at gyms and stuff like that, they've got all those machines, and you can test your heart rate and get all that, that's done, but it doesn't teach you what to eat.
Yes.
So you go somewhere else to learn what to eat, and then you go somewhere else for another part that of your body that you need to make sure that's managing well. So it's not one.
It's not holistic.
No, it's not one.
That's actually a good observation, because we've siloed everything, haven't we?
Mm.
And that's contrary to the nature of humans being social animals.
I don't think we're very social these days. I think we've become very unsociable with the iPads and the phones and that. So you go and even into a restaurant and look and observe how many people are on their phones while they're having dinner with 5 others sitting around the table. It's unbelievable.
I'll never forget driving down from Auckland to Hamilton for my father's funeral, and the 3 of our kids were on the back seat. And I thought, this is not like them, that we've travelled most of the journey and there's been no conversation. And so I adjusted my mirror and saw them all on their phones. And I said, who the heck are you guys texting? Each other. I said, you're right beside each other. We prefer texting. I really struggle with that.
The new texting out at the moment, there's no vowels in the words. And I said to my grandson, who is 13, I said to him, so if there's no vowels in the words, it's not a word.
No.
And he said, yes, it is, Nan. I said, no, it's not. A vowel is what makes it the word. So if you're talking about a mouse, if you haven't got the O, well, what does that, or the U or the E, what does it sound like?
It's MS.
And am I supposed to know that that's the word mouse?
Well, see, if you just put down MS, that has a completely different connotation to me to what mouse does.
Yeah, MS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's what systems, and that's what systems are doing. They're saying,
Yes.
it's okay to be able to do that. When the texting came along, I was like, holy, what does that mean? And I struggled a long time trying to make sense of some of the words and that. So I'm not too bad now, obviously, but I mean, yeah.
Oh, I still go back to my grandkids and say, sorry, can you put that out in a full word so Granddad has a chance of understanding? Because I seriously, if someone did that and took the vowels out, I'd be there for 2 days trying to work out what one word was.
I probably won't even bother answering it.
Crikes. I was unaware of that trend. It's a bit scary.
But why? Why would they do that? What is the sense of that?
I guess it's a reflection that it's a speed issue, that they can send a whole lot of, in their mind, words to each other that they don't have to waste time spent trying to type them.
And they wonder why they can't get their school C.
Yeah.
Well, they don't have school C anymore, but the
equivalent, they can't get it NCA level, whatever it is that they're trying to work on. But mind you, I can't talk because it was definitely school certificate, because I prided myself in having 3 goes at it and failing miserably 3 times, and English was my worst subject. I seriously couldn't write a comprehensible sentence together, and it just, I look back and mind blown at it where I'm at now.
Where you are now and what you've done with your English, yes.
But it was, in saying that, to try and learn it as an adult was 100 times harder than having comprehended it as a kid.
It's funny you should say that, because I wouldn't know, because I didn't comprehend it as a kid. So when I went back as an adult student, I couldn't compare it because I didn't know it back then. I didn't, So I finished high school when I was like 15.
Wow.
And that, but like I got a job, I was fine and stuff like that. I was able to read and write. Well, that wasn't an issue. So when I went back into as an adult student, I didn't know any different. So
I'd been lucky in that sense, because English was my worst subject. I'd always been a fanatical, keen reader. And it wasn't until I was a teenager that Dad decided what books I had to read and what I didn't. And it just, I didn't want to read the books he was giving me, and they turned me off reading. But once I left home, I went back to reading. And if you want to be able to write, you've got to be able to read.
Yeah.
The two are too closely interwoven.
That's right. That's right. And that's what my lecturer said to me, Moerangi, if you really want to kind of be academia and anything, you read these, and she gave me all this stuff. Loved it, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I still research stuff. I go into Google Scholar and read journal articles, and because I really like going back to that academic dry stuff.
Stimulating, isn't it?
It is. The stuff that they're battling and fighting with is just gets my juices going, and I get excited by it. And that's one thing that academia gave me was the excitement over new information and not sitting still with what you're learning. So I wonder what the kids are going to be like that are struggling now in 20 years' time.
Yeah. I don't know. It's funny what we have to leave behind, eh? It's scary.
It is. Dad always told us as kids, leave everything better than when you found it. And I look at the state of the world now and think, we've let everybody down miserably.
Somebody has.
Well, we've all got a collective responsibility in it.
I think we're governed to a certain degree.
Yeah, and that's where our model of democracy has let us down. That when it's the concept of democracy is the majority rules, and if the majority are on a warped view of the world, you've got it. You know, and look, what's happening in America at the moment is the classic example of, you know, they keep both the red and blue are shouting we're about democracy, and I think you actually don't understand the concept, you guys, because democracy is actually allowing even the weakest people a voice.
And that's it. And are they having that?
No, they haven't there, and they don't in New Zealand.
No.
That's our tragic reality. We don't actually have true democracy because not everybody has a voice. Well, that's actually one of the why we exist is actually technically one of our reasons for existing is that we've our measure of success is we're not needed anymore.
Yes.
And but mind you, we used to say that when we're in the police, if we'd done our job well, police would not be needed, and yet we're growing the numbers of police because there are influences that are beyond our control that are making that necessary. And
but within Waiuku.
Within Waiuku.
Within Waiuku, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we can safely say that is what we aim for.
It is, well, it's got to be. Sometimes you've got to strive for the impossible. So even if you don't get to the impossible, the journey has been set. And that's why I go back to, I still staunchly believe the intergenerational approach, which we're one of the few organisations I know have taken this on. Let's work with one generation to work with the next and so on, so that success for Waiuku Family Support was I've been dead a long time by the time it happens.
That's right. But the foundation's been laid.
Yeah, we've got to have that. We've got to have that. It was fascinating doing one of these podcasts with Sue Ushaw the other week and learning that the kaupapa of the organisation was to be bicultural from dot one.
Cool.
And I thought, wow, we've brought it back to the basics and on the right track, thank goodness. Because I think, I might be wrong, it'd be nice journeying through a number of podcasts, but I don't sense that was a driver for a decade or two, the whole bicultural issue.
I think probably because Sue comes from a social work background, that she was able to recognise the necessity of biculturalism, but the ones that I guess took over from her weren't on the same level of thinking. I'm thinking that theirs was, okay, we'll have an organisation to help people, and that was theirs. So. And that was the pathway perhaps that they took at that time, which is not wrong.
It was actually deeper than that. And it was a surprise for me that her and her husband couldn't have kids, and so they adopted 2 Maori boys, and they were like chalk and cheese. One was huge and muscular and into rugby and everything, and the other one had Asian was part of his thing, and so he looked like an Asian, and they were quite physically different looking, but they were brown skinned. And she described some of the disgusting racism that she encountered, that when they'd turn up to sports grounds and her son would be out there playing rugby, and people saying, what's he doing on there? We don't need his sort on there, and phrases like that. And it's just, and when we had our thing, it was just after that program, No Māori Allowed.
Yes, that stirred a lot of...
Still stirred a lot.
Yes, it did. And that's probably good from like my perspective, that's what her foster children had gone through, because basically that's our life.
Exactly.
And you know, you only had that for that short time. Ours is intergenerational. Ours was my grandparents to my parents to myself, and still to myself down to my children. I know, because like my 2 boys, the 2 Amaro, one when he went to do his mechanicking, and, you know, they take them into the community and that, he goes, oh, well, I'm going to call you George because I can't say your name. And I went, And it is very difficult to pronounce Amaro and Enoka, so they chose not to use Māori names for their children because they didn't want to put them through that same. But the thing is that we use our names so they live on.
Yeah, exactly.
And so having them as a second name is for me is it's okay, but if it doesn't get used, then you lose the name, and with that you lose whakapapa. So you know, it's amazing. Yeah, it's just.
Well, I've got an academic, and she's professor of communication at University of California, San Diego, and she's actually Russian-born. But when she shifted to the States, she took on an English name because they couldn't pronounce her Russian name.
That's right.
But she goes home to Russia frequently and still is fluent in her Russian, just to try and keep. Well, for her, she's able to prove through proper high-quality research science that language does shape our reality. So if you control and manipulate language, you control and manipulate people.
Well, that's how I feel with now today when they. So me is that I'm not fluent in te reo at all, but I understand it a lot better when my mum and them spoke it. So the transliteration today hasn't got the essence or the spirituality waidu that used to have at that time, because they're trying to make it a one language, which means, what does that mean? That means that everybody is the same.
Yes,
but that's not reality. The case. That's not the case. So
each iwi has its own uniqueness.
They do, and their own, what we call, so Te Arawa has theirs, and Tainui has theirs, and South Island has theirs. We all have it, and that's when they got up to speak, they knew exactly where they come from the dialect that they spoke.
Yes.
And so now they're trying to make a one language, and you can't say that the language determines the person.
Which becomes a nonsense. You know, I was in Bath in England and ended up in hospital through one of my many misadventures. And my son and his now wife came in to visit me, and they said, oh, what are the people beside you like, Bruce? I said, I have no idea. They speak a foreign language. I have no idea where they even come from. And they burst out laughing when the people, they said, they're Geordies, Bruce, they're speaking English. I said, you're kidding, I don't understand a word of what they're saying. They're Geordies. It's one of the tribes in England. I don't understand.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So different areas have their own dialect as well. Yes.
But to be fair, I'll never forget when I was in Wellington, we had a guy transferred from Westport, Greymouth, because he was coming up for his 2-year exams and he hadn't experienced enough. We had trouble understanding him because A, he spoke so slowly, and B, he used words that none of us understood. And that technically he was speaking the same language as us. And that's just within little old New Zealand. And you go to Dunedin and they speak a different version of English again. So, yeah. Well, we get to move on to the next person, but it's been, and as always, I love it when us two catch up. Time just sits still. As we said at the beginning, we go through 2-3 days dead easy. So many things that we like talking about, but it's been wonderful, and I look forward to doing some more of these with you, Moerangi, because you're one of the jewels in the crown, for want of a better phrase, of Waiuku Family Support. You make it richer, more beautiful, more holistic, and you give it a wider role that it wouldn't have if it wasn't for your gracious and beautiful personality. So I thank you for your gift of being you to us.
Thank you.
I mean it.